Good morning and welcome to the National Television Network, where we are about to carry live the proceedings of the Senate that will be meeting this morning. My name is Virgil Leonti. My colleague Michael Gasper is not in today. This morning, the Senate will be discussing some bills and we'll be laying also some statutory instruments. Some of the bills that we saw that was passed in the lower house on Thursday, and these will be carried into today's sitting of the Senate. The proceedings are underway as we await the Deputy President, who will be commencing.
Let us pray.
Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding, we thine unworthy servants here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the King, the public weal, peace, and tranquility of St. Lucia, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Ghost be with us all evermore. Amen.
Good morning, Senators. Madam Clerk, could you administer the oath to the new Senators, please? Thank you.
I, George Goddard, do solemnly affirm that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to St. Lucia, that I will uphold and defend the Constitution and the laws of St. Lucia, and I will conscientiously and impartially discharge my responsibilities to the people of St. Lucia. I affirm.
I, Joshua Wayne Harrow, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to St. Lucia, and that I will uphold and defend the Constitution and laws of St. Lucia, and I will consciously and impartially discharge my responsibilities to the people of St. Lucia. So help me God.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good morning, Senators. I have received correspondence from the Speaker of the House of Assembly advising that the following bills were passed in the House of Assembly and forwarded to the Senate for its concurrence: Payment System and Services, Administration of Small Successions Amendment, Immigration Amendment, Passport Amendment, Banking Amendment. I have also received excuse from Senator Alison Jean. He's unable to be with us today, and so we welcome Senator Goddard, George Goddard, and we also welcome back Senator Joshua Harrow. We welcome back to the chamber Madam Clerk, who was out, along with Administrative Clerk Nita Louis. So Madam Jean-Louis, they are back from a conference in New Zealand where they learned quite a bit, and so we are happy to have Madam Clerk and Administrative Clerk back with us at the Parliament. I also wish to welcome in the gallery this morning 2 young distinguished graduates from the Viewfort Secondary School, and I've been told that they are the children of our leader of government business, Senator Gibeon Ferdinand. So I wish to welcome the Gibeon children this morning to our Senate seating. Welcome. I hope you find the session very interesting, informative. And of course, congratulations on your graduation from your prestigious Viewfort Secondary School, after Castries Comprehensive, of course. Senators, I wish to address you on a matter: rules of behavior and courtesies in the House, as taken from the document from the House of Commons. The section speaks of attendance in the chamber. And it reads, if you are to speak in the chamber, you are to be present for the opening speeches. After you have spoken, you must remain in the chamber for at least the next 2 speeches, and you must return to hear the winding up speech or rebuttal. And the House of Commons has a very large space with many members, but for us, we are very small. So you can understand when members leave the chamber what it looks like. So, Senators, I wish to add that it's a demonstration of courtesy that if you are listened to by your colleagues, it is only fair and respectful that you show them that same courtesy. It is not my intention to curtail the right of movement of senators. However, it is just proper decorum to be present during the debate. Thank you, Senators. I look forward to your cooperation on this matter. Statements from parliamentary secretaries. Papers to be laid. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, colleagues. Before I proceed, may I beg your leave, Madam President, to join you in welcoming our new temporary senators, Senator Goddard, and returning with us, Senator Harrow. I also welcome my 2 children to the chamber. They are on school break, and it's a profited opportunity for them to come in and observe the operations and the procedures of this chamber. I hope they do learn and enjoy the experience. I also noted your opening remarks, statements. Unfortunately, I would have liked that all senators would have been present to hear it, and I hope definitely intend to continue to abide by your guidance and the rules, as well as the standing orders. Madam President, I also want to take the opportunity to congratulate all of the winners and participants in our various activities. Knowing that I'm from the Ministry of Culture, we have had quite a few activities associated with our carnival season, including the Soca Monarch, including the pageant, national pageant, as well as the Groovy Monarch. And over the weekend, we saw the crowning of the Calypso Monarch, the Ezreal. I want to congratulate all of the participants, particularly the newer ones. And I must mention, we saw Lucia joining in the fray, her first time around being one of the top performers. I want to commend all of them. I also want to congratulate the winners and participants in the panorama competition. I understand Pantine emerged. I won't say anything about Courts Babano Steel Pan in this chamber. I just won't say anything, but I just want to congratulate all of the winners. And I also wish to congratulate the last night's King and Queen of the Bands winners. And wish all of the other participants in the remainder of the activities this week is, we see the continuation of the private events. Somebody was asking me about my tie this morning. It's a festive week, so I just decided to brighten up a little bit. But I wish that all persons participating in the various events related to the carnival season will be safe, will enjoy responsibly, and that we'll have a successful event that will culminate next week with the street parade, and hopefully we would have had 2 weeks of safe, enjoyable, and successful carnival celebrations. Madam President, I now beg to lay the following papers standing in my name. Let me just go to the first. Where are they? Just bear with me, I just want to make sure I have them there. Oh, there you go. Statutory Instrument number 104 of 2025, Customs Duties Amendment of Schedule 4 number 1 order, and Statutory Instrument number 105 of 2025, Tourism Development, Majestic Beach Chair Rental and Grill order.
Bills. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to lay for second reading a bill shortly entitled Banking Amendment. Thank you, Madam President. I wish to provide some additional explanation, context, and detail with regard to the purpose and the intention of this amendment. Madam President, the bill for consideration, the Banking Amendment, intends to amend the Banking Act, Cap 1201, and seeks to provide for prudent supervision and market conduct of banking business in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, the ECCU, as well as promoting financial literacy and inclusion, as well as market integrity. Now, Madam President, most of us would know that the Eastern Caribbean, the ECCU, is responsible for ensuring that the stability of the EC dollar, the Eastern Caribbean dollar, remains stable. And we noticed for many years since I've known myself, this currency's value has not been fluctuating like other currencies in the region. And one of the main reasons why that is so is because the EC dollar is pegged against the US dollar like all other currencies, and it maintains a rate of about 1 to 98. So when that happens, you can almost be guaranteed of the stability of your currency. And Madam President, that's very important for us in the sub-region, because in the business of trade, we are small developing states. We must also always make sure that we have the persons who trade using our currency have the comfort that they can do business with very little stress and worry about the currency not being stable. That reflects the strength of the ECCU in maintaining the stability, especially for the purpose of foreign exchange. Madam President, the amendment will facilitate the further advancement of the harmonization of the banking sector, as well as enhance regularity in the environment in the currency union, which will in turn supplement the strengthening of the legal framework for the conduct of banking business. This act is amended, Madam President, to strengthen the legal framework by modernizing the definition under the interpretation provision of the act in section 2. For affiliate banking business, exposure, financial group, large exposure, licensed financial holding company, and an officer. There are also some new definitions inserted in the act for the branch CARICOM National to outsource as well as spouse and Tier 1 capital for the purpose of the new provisions introduced in the Act. Furthermore, Madam President, as it relates to the definition of the Act, the amendment in this bill makes it clear that the employee should not be connected to another person and that the foreign financial institutions, and that is CARICOM National, is a local financial institution for the payment of fees under this Act. Madam President, the provision in the Act relating to the requirement for licensing, that's under Section 3, is amended in the bill to make it clear that the corporation rather than the financial institution is liable for any penalties that are imposed. As it relates to the examination of books of a person carrying on banking without a license, and that is in Section 4, that provision of the Act is amended under the bill to give a police officer named in an order by the High Court to enter and search the premises of a person carrying on banking business to use reasonable force in the case of resistance. In addition, Madam President, the bill amends the Act to provide and make proper section references in the provision of the appointment of a receiver for failure to hold license under Section 5, effective date of removal under Section 107, and failure to comply with the direction under Section 108. With respect to the provision of an application for a license under Section 7, the bill makes changes to the Act for the submission of information in relation to a group as opposed to a financial holding company, and to impose a foreign financial institution if it opens a subsidiary within the Caribbean, the currency union, to submit to the central bank the specified information as is applicable, or as in its application, sorry. Madam President, the bill amends the Act to change the use of the word conduct as it relates to a financial institution to carry on provisions on revocation of license under Section 14 and revocation of license of financial holding company under Section 42. In terms of the amendment of the provisions of authorization of location and approval of new business premises under Section 119, the bill amends the Act to refer to the location of automatic banking machine instead of electronic banking system. Madam President, in the Act, the financial requirements and limitations of a licensed financial institution are provided for, including the maintenance of specified assets under Section 57. Therefore, the definition that was positioned under the provision for the maintenance of specified assets is repositioned in the Act as a new provision that provides a definition of specified assets. The new provision, Madam President, and that's Section 43A, includes as specified assets notes and coins which are legal tender in the currency union, and foreign notes and coins at the central bank, as the central bank may specify. Balances at the central bank and net balances at a licensed financial institution in the currency union. But where the balances are negative, they will be subtracted from the specified assets. Additionally, Madam President, the provision in the Act on the minimum paid or assigned capital, that is under Section 44, that is amended in the bill to change references to St. Lucia to the currency union and to insert a new provision that requires the central bank to approve the holding of an assigned capital or assigned capital in the form of specified assets. Madam President, the bill amends the provision in the Act on maintenance of reserve funds under Section 45. For a licensed financial institution or licensed holding company to obtain the written approval of the central bank in a declaration, credit, payment of the dividend, or other transfer from profits results in an impairment of the capital required under the Act, inadequate and inappropriate forms of liquidity or negative retained earnings or accumulated deficit. Madam President, the bill also amends the Act to remove references to the capital base or substitute Tier 1 capital in the provision in the Act relating to limit of exposure that is under Section 49. The restrictions on exposure to related parties, that is, that's under Section 50. The prohibition on engaging or investing in trade and outsourcing, that is under Section 53. Submission of returns and production of information as required by the central bank, and that is under Section 89. Changes are also made to the Act in the bill to provide to the provision on the restrictions on lending to employees under Section 51, acquisition and establishment of financial subsidiaries under Section 54, and restrictions on investment in real property under Section 55. Other provisions in the Act that are amended under the bill are the provisions on the appointment of the external auditor, and Madam President, that's under Section 60, and as well as audited financial statements under Section 69, and the failure to comply with remedial action under Section 80. Madam President, in addition, the bill amends the Act to substitute the following provisions in the Act for notification of removal of directors and officers under Section 88. Notification to the central bank of appointment of officers and directors under Section 101. The right to make representation under Section 104. The notice of confirmed removal under Section 105. Failure to comply with Section 103 under Section 109. Abandoned property to vest in the Crown under Section 169. Failure to file a report or to pay property under Section 174, and breach financial institutions and asset management vehicles under Section 186. Further amendments are made to the Act under the bill. For example, Madam President, the provision in the Act that relates to the disclosure for basis for changes, that is Section 92, is modified to state that the financial institution must make such disclosures to the central bank. Alterations are also made in the bill to provide in the Act that provide for the minimum criteria for determining whether a person is fit and proper, and that is under Section 97. The removal of and disqualification of director or officer under Section 103, capital increase be existing shareholders under Section 131, termination of office at administration under 135, Section 137, grounds for receivership, and that's under Section 138, commencement and notice of receivership under Section 140, avoidance of pre-receivership under Section 147, report, publication, and disposal of abundant property under Section 168, secrecy of information under Section 178, and administrative penalties to be placed to the credit of the central bank under Section 180, and repeal of savings under Section 192. Madam President, under the bill, a new provision is added to the Act to make the provision for receivership and compulsory liquidation in respect of a person, and that is under Section 138(1)(b), and that new section would be Section 138(a). Schedule 1 of the Act, Madam President, which lists the fees for licensed financial institution, is also substituted in the bill, as well as Schedule 3 that contains offenses of which liability to conviction may be discharged by the payment of fixed penalty. So, Madam President, these aforementioned are overall mechanisms that have been adopted and allow for the resolution of various banking matters towards an improvement in this act. And so I present these amendments with the well-intended benefits to be approved and agreed upon and passed in this chamber. I thank you, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that Banking Amendment Bill be read a second time. Okay. Senators, the question is that the Banking Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the Banking Act, Chapter 12.01.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 3.
Amendment of Section 2.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 4.
Amendment of Section 3.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 5.
Amendment of Section 4.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 6.
Amendment of Section 5.
Clause 6 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 7.
Amendment of Section 7.
Clause 7 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 8.
Amendment of Section 14.
Clause 8 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 9.
Amendment of Section 19.
Clause 9 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 10.
Amendment of Section 42.
Clause 10 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 11.
Amendment of Part 5.
Clause 11 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 12.
Amendment of Section 44.
Clause 12 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 13.
Amendment of Section 45.
Clause 13 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 14.
Amendment of Section 49.
Clause 14 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 15.
Amendment of Section 50.
Clause 15 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 16.
Amendment of Section 51.
Clause 16 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 17.
Amendment of Section 53.
Clause 17 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 18.
Amendment of Section 54.
Clause 18 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 19.
Amendment of Section 55.
Clause 19 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 20.
Amendment of Section 57.
Clause 20 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 21.
Amendment of Section 60.
Clause 21 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 22.
Amendment of Section 69.
Clause 22 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 23.
Substitution of Section 80.
Clause 23 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 24.
Substitution of Section 88.
Clause 24 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 25.
Amendment of Section 89.
Clause 25 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 26.
Amendment of Section 92.
Clause 26 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 27.
Amendment of Section 97.
Clause 27 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 28.
Substitution of Section 101.
Clause 28 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 29.
Amendment of Section 103.
Clause 29 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 30.
Substitution of Section 104.
Clause 30 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 31.
Substitution of Section 105.
Clause 31 stands part of the bill. Clause 32.
Amendment of Section 107.
Clause 32 stands part of the bill. Clause 33.
Amendment of Section 108.
Clause 33 stands part of the bill. Clause 34.
Substitution of Section 109.
Clause 34 stands part of the bill. Clause 35.
Amendment of Section 131.
Clause 35 stands part of the bill. Clause 36.
Amendment of Section 137.
Clause 36 stands part of the bill. Clause 37.
Amendment of Section 138.
Clause 37 stands part of the bill. Clause 38.
Insertion of new Section 138A.
Clause 38 stands part of the bill. Clause 39.
Amendment of Section 140.
Clause 39 stands part of the bill. Clause 40.
Amendment of Section 147.
Clause 40 stands part of the bill. Clause 41.
Amendment of Section 168.
Clause 41 stands part of the bill. Clause 42.
Substitution of Section 169.
Clause 42 stands part of the bill. Clause 43.
Substitution of Section 174.
Clause 43 stands part of the bill. Clause 44.
Amendment of Section 178.
Clause 44 stands part of the bill. Clause 45.
Amendment of Section 180.
Clause 45 stands part of the bill. Clause 46.
Substitution of Section 186.
Clause 46 stands part of the bill. Clause 47.
Amendment of Section 192.
Clause 47 stands part of the bill. Clause 48.
Substitution of Schedule 1.
Clause 48 stands part of the bill. Clause 49.
Substitution of Schedule 3.
Clause 49 stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Banking Amendment Bill went through committee stage without amendments. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and that the bill be read a third time passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Banking Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This Act may be cited as the Banking Amendment Act 2025.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for second reading a bill shortly entitled Payment Systems and Services. Madam President, like I did with the first amendment, the first bill, I wish to provide the Chamber with, the Senate with some justification for this amendment or these amendments. First of all, Madam President, the Payment Services Systems Bill, the main purpose for that bill is to provide for the licensing and regulation of payment services providers and the oversight of the payment systems. We would be aware, Madam President, that in St. Lucia and in recent time that has become a very popular and very efficient method for taking care of transactions, especially payments. And the procedures relating to these payments, we need to ensure that these are secure and that the customers and users of these systems have the confidence that when they use those systems, that what they are doing is secure and protected. In St. Lucia, we have the likes of SurePay. I'm sure some of us in this chamber have used it or are using it. And there are a number of other similar facilities that are used for that purpose. This is really part of the real digital transformation in the region, in the world, and of course, St. Lucia is part of the global community, and we expect that we would be keeping up with the various developments. But while we do so, we need to ensure that there is a certain level of security, confidence, and safety in using those systems. We need to ensure that the customers, their transactions are secure. So, Madam President, the advancement of these operations and the regulation of the payment systems is provided under the Payment Systems Act, and that is the Payment System Act Cap 1224. And the Act ensures that it provides the governing procedures for the payment systems. The Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, through the Eastern Caribbean, the ECCU, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, has agreed to, has the power to regulate and to provide oversight for the payments and to settle any disputes, or also to have purchase payment facilities and netting contracts or any other arrangements. Under the Act, the Central Bank has exclusive authority for the supervision and payment systems, as I indicated. Now, Madam President, the payment system services landscape has changed dramatically, and particularly in recent time. And the Central Bank, being interested in nurturing a payment system environment that attracts innovative payment services and especially from non-bank service providers, in the interest of financial inclusion and the reduction of the use of cash, drafted the bill with the assistance of a legislative drafting consultant. And that's very critical, Madam President, because the initiative is really one that was taken by the Central Bank. And as a member of the ECCU, we have to remain compliant with those changes. And this is one of the main reasons we are here. In addition, Madam President, the bill is an integral component of the Central Bank's modernization and development plan for the payment system in the ECCU, and it is a part of the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project in the Eastern Caribbean, spearheaded by the World Bank in collaboration with the OECS Commission. Between 2021 and 2024, Madam President, the bill, through several consultations, was reviewed by the AG's chambers and the Parliamentary Council in the ECCU. In June of 2024, the bill was recalled by the Central Bank to make provisions for the inclusion of the Office of the Financial Conduct and Inclusion, the OFCI. So that particular development happened in 2024, only last year. However, Madam President, the Central Bank made the decision that the bill is enacted with the understanding that the amendments to be made make provisions for the OFCI, which I just mentioned, which will be undertaken following its enactment. The bill has had its first reading in the House on December 10th, 2024, and in the Senate on December 12th of last year, 2024. As a result of the bill not being presented for second reading during that session of Parliament, the bill must be reconsidered by the Cabinet for transmission to Parliament for enactment in the new Parliament session. So that bill died in the last session, and now we have followed the procedure to return. Madam President, the objectives of the bill are to introduce a comprehensive licensing regime calibrated to specific risks posed by the activities through a new modular approach to regulation that facilitates growth and innovation and financial inclusion. Another objective, Madam President, is that the bill seeks to broaden the scope of the regulated activities to non-banks to accommodate a wider range of payment services and activities. Also to strengthen consumer protection, which I mentioned in my introduction, to engender confidence in the user of the electronic payment systems, and to enhance the safety and efficiency of the ECCU payment system and the capacity to maintain financial stability. Madam President, in my opening statement, I did mention it, and even in the previous amendment, I made reference to the strength of the ECCU and the EC dollar and the stability that we enjoy with trade. And these are some of the reasons why we are continuing to be able to do that, because we keep our financial procedures and operations up to standard and safe. So the bill makes provision for its purpose under Clause 3 of the bill, which is to establish a legal framework to enable a payment system that is safe, efficient, resilient, inclusive, and competitive through the management of risks, the management of financial stability, and the protection of interests of consumers. In Part 1 of the bill, Madam President, therein it contains the administration provisions, and therefore the functions of the powers of the central bank are set out in clauses 4 to 8 of the bill. Generally, the central bank is empowered to monitor and oversee the payment systems, promote financial inclusion and financial innovation, protect consumers and the ancillary to these powers, continually modernize the payment systems through new policies, establishing standards and procedures, and monitor and oversee the clearing and settlement system. Additionally, the bill empowers the central bank to support the operations and participation of a payment system, including ownership and participation. The central bank is also empowered under the bill to establish, own, operate, and participate in its ownership of a system, act as a central counterparty, open and hold accounts for an operator or a participant, and hold securities for clearing and settlement of transfers, and a direct payment system provider to enter into an arrangement with the operator of a payment system to achieve interoperability of the payment account with the payment system. Now, Madam President, in carrying out these functions and powers, the central bank, in accordance with this bill, may cooperate with other public authorities, engage in and regulate the supervision of financial institutions and other entities directly or indirectly involved in payments services and their operations. And so, Madam President, there are a number of other clauses that have been amended. For example, in Clause 9, the bill, the purpose for advising the central bank, also the central bank having the authority to make rules relevant to operations of the ECCU, that is under Clauses 10, 11, and 12 of the bill. In Part 2 of the bill, the licenses may be issued to a person who operates a service or provides a payment system without a license to do so from the central bank under Clause 13. And it also speaks of penalties under Clause 14 of the bill. It also speaks to the consultation with the Minister of Finance, so the role of the Minister of Finance in that particular case. Also speaks to that under Clause 14. The procedure for obtaining a license, and that is provided in Clause 15 and 16, and also the provisions that are made for conditions relating to electronic money under Clauses 19 and 20. There are also provisions for duration of a license, that is under Clause 21, and Also for suspension and revocation of a license, these provisions are made under Clause 23. The fees, issues like application fees, licenses fees, and annual renewal fees, these are provisions are made under Clause 24. And they also make reference to the credit unions and licensing under Clause 27, as well as in Part 3, where the bill provides guidelines for oversight under clauses 28 to 37. So, Madam President, there are a number of these particular provisions that are being made, guided by the policies of the central bank, to ensure that the financial systems that offer those services in the region, particularly in our country, are meeting the standards, particularly with regard to security and confidence of customers. And so I put this to the Senate for its approval, bearing in mind the importance of us meeting and remaining compliant with the central bank. Thank you, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that the Payment System and Services Bill be read a second time. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Madam President. Just some very, very short and quick observations. I note, as the leader of government business has pointed out, that the purpose of this bill is to replace, really, the current payment services bill. And so, therefore, it represents or ought to represent a improvement and modernization of the existing legislation. And I have noted that this comes also on the heels of the amendment of the Banking Act, which I am is geared at the same end, modernizing our financial structures or financial system in the ECCU. I commend the ECCB for this, for constantly reviewing and modernizing the legislation. I would like to encourage the government as a policy to do that with our legislation generally. I think there's too often times our legislation languishes and does not keep up with modern times. So I'm happy that this legislation is being brought to the Senate for our review. I note that it's a significant leap forward on the existing piece of legislation, taking into account things like electronic money or cryptocurrency, as we would currently commonly call it, making provisions for settlement systems, payment systems, etc. I wanted to note that it's beyond sure pay, which the leader of government business noted as an example, but really and truly, all the financial activities, online activities that we've gotten very familiar with, being able to pay our bills online, being able to transfer monies from one account to another, from one bank to another. These are the sort of activities that we regulated by this piece of legislation. And I am quite happy to note that it provides at Part 4 for consumer protection. It is one of the areas I think is still lacking from the Banking Act. And I know we're not supposed to go back over legislation that's already addressed, but I just wanted to point out the difference between the two pieces of legislation. And I think it's something that does need to be addressed sooner rather than later by the central bank in terms of consumer protection in relation to banking operations. So I'm happy that this makes provision for consumer protection in relation to the operation of the payment systems, particularly noticing changes of fees and those sorts of things. The one concern that I did have is as regards to the establishment of the Eastern Caribbean Payment Council, which is to oversee the payment systems and the regulation in the ECCU. And the particular concern I had was with regard to the composition. I find there's a little bit of uncertainty with regard to the manner or perhaps the number of persons who will be engaged and form the council. I note and this is at Section 10 of the bill. Section 10.1, start at Section 10.2, says that the council number shall not exceed 15, which means you can have as many or as few as the ECCB decides to appoint. And it then goes on to explain who the membership of that council should be. You have the Deputy Governor of the Central Bank, a representative of the Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission, a representative from a non-financial bank services regulator. Then you have representatives of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union Banking Association. How many representatives are we speaking of? Similarly, we have representatives of consumer advocacy groups and association. Again, how many persons are we speaking of? I would prefer if we had definite numbers so that it removes any possibility that the composition of the, sorry, that's at page 20. So page 20 of the bill, section 10.1. I was saying if we had fixed numbers, it removes any possibility of the composition of the council being, and I'm trying to choose my word carefully, being designed to achieve any particular ends. If we have a predetermined number of persons and predetermined representatives beforehand, it means then that we know exactly who is likely to make up the council, what their interests are, and what ends they should be serving, as opposed to the possibility of gerrymandering, which might arise where you just have numbers being left to a body to determine. That being said, I believe, again, as I noted, it's a very comprehensive piece of legislation and will significantly improve the regulation of our payment systems in the region. Hopefully, it will encourage rather than hinder the development of our payment systems and the services that they offer. And hopefully it can redound to the benefit of our financial institutions and our financial system as a whole. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Fady.
I'm sorry, Independent Senator. Morning, Madam President. Just a few brief comments on the bill. Madam President, I want to congratulate the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank for having the foresight to provide the infrastructure as the Caribbean or the small island developing states in the ECCCU member territories seek to digitalize their economy. Madam President, the question of digitalization of economies is a very, very, very old phenomenon, which would date back to even before the dot-com boom of the early 90s. The internet, Madam President, and the introduction of such some 40 years ago, we would have seen that not just developed countries in the world, but even less developed countries in the world would have been moving ahead, Madam President, to digitalize their economy. So this is a very important step, late, if you ask me, very late, but very crucial step. Madam President, small island developing states like ours have no choice but to diversify their definition of services and to expand on their economic options, to also include payment systems, the production of them, the conceptualization of those systems, and the use of those systems, Madam President, in the furtherance of sectors such as tourism, for example. So, being a tourism-dependent economy, Madam President, it becomes even more crucial. Quite recently, I heard the Minister of Tourism saying that our vendors needed to up their game because in dealing with an international clientele, many vendors too often, he cited, would not have the payment systems to receive sales from very willing customers. Madam President, I know that sector a little bit, and I know, Madam President, that it is very hard for many vendors to do it on their own. So I want to call on the government, specifically the Ministry of Tourism, because the leader of government business is in that ministry, and to say that, look, no effort must be spared. So while we come to Parliament, we pass this legislation, it is also absolutely vital that we spread the awareness to various sectors, all of the stakeholders, so that people are aware that this law and its component parts have been passed in the House of Assembly, and it is now there for their benefit. But also to go further, to help those sectors like the vending sector, the taxi sector. Those of us who would have used taxis overseas many, many decades ago, taxi drivers all over the world, you can swipe your card if you have no cash, Madam President. So there are so many opportunities for us to improve and to help our local tourism industry and our stakeholders who are dealing with an international clientele to provide those services that the customers are very used to. Speaking of tourism, by the way, Madam President, it is crucial that the very limited clientele that is coming to the shores this winter, that our vendors use the payment systems, our taxi drivers and other people within the tourism value chain use payment systems to optimize the opportunity that comes from the very limited business that we're seeing coming in the summer. Madam President, to qualify what I'm saying, the Tourism Authority suggests that in every sector, every month so far rather, that we have seen declines in stayover arrivals. So in their latest report, it suggests that January was down 2%, February was down 2%, the month of March in stayover arrivals.
Senator Ferdinand.
Madam President, I rise on a point of order.
What is your point of order, Senator?
I refer to the relevance of the line of conversation. This is an amendment to the Payment Services Bill. And while I appreciated the Senator's connection with the tourism industry, which of course would be benefiting from this, the Senator is now delving into details about visitor arrivals. And I cannot see any relevance in going into details about declining visitor arrivals to the current agenda item in front of us. So I challenge the relevance of this conversation to what is before us.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Fede. Senator Gibeon did raise the issue of the standing order putting into relevance of the debate at this time. Do you care to make the connection between the bill being before the Senate and the issue of visitor arrival? Because we're speaking of payment system and services.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And
if you cannot make that connection, I advise that you move away and stick to the matter before the Senate.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, I'm happy to. I started out by making a statement to preface me outlining the visitor arrivals. I started out by saying that there's very limited business this year for the various stakeholders within the tourism value chain. So I outlined that it would be good that if we had taxi drivers and vendors and other small businesses within the tourism value chain, that if they had payment systems, that they would be in a very good position, Madam President, to optimize business, sales, revenue, opportunity. But in making the statement that there's limited business, that to say that we have few customers this winter, I think it was incumbent on me, Madam President, to use empirical evidence to qualify what I was saying. Hence me taking a few seconds to outline the visitor numbers for the month.
Okay, now that you have done that, you should move away into the business at hand.
No problem, Madam President, but I was only at the month of March and I had 2 more months, which is April and May. Can I?
Point has been made. You may move away and stick to the bill.
Thank you. So, Madam President, we see a significant decline in the tourist fortunes of the country. And it means, therefore, that if you don't have the payment systems, Madam President, as a vendor, as a taxi driver, it means that your capacity to yield
Senator Gibeon Ferdinand.
Madam President, I now rise on a point of order.
Point of order, Senator.
Senator Fede is now misleading the House. Now that he has tried to pretend to move away from the irrelevant detail, he's now making a statement that there has been a decline or there is something about the numbers or the arrivals being on a decline. I wish to correct that and indicate to Senator Fede that we just recently announced record arrivals in the industry in the last 2 quarters. So I do not understand why he would even make a statement suggesting that there are, any reductions. I know what he's trying to do, madam. He's trying to focus on tourism arrivals rather than the subject matter of payment systems. But to allow the senator to continue a conversation about declining tourism arrivals, which is not true, I think is dishonorable and should not be permitted.
Senator Fede, again, I ask that you stick to the matter of the payment system and services. I've given you some latitude. I did. So I ask that you please stick to the payment system and services, which is the bill before us at this time.
So Madam President, I'm always guided by you, but you see, the public has just heard Senator Ferdinand suggest that the tourism arrivals, contrary to what I have suggested, is erroneous. And I would ask for a moment just to clarify that with the Tourism Office owns report, where it said that every single month in the year so far
Senator,
has recorded
Honorable
declines.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. When I last rose, I did not rise on a point of elucidation, so that Senator Fede is now attempting to elucidate and clarify. I rose on a point of order, and I know Senator Fede knows the difference. He's now providing clarification. I did not rise on a point of elucidation. If I wanted him to elucidate, I would ask. I rose on a point of order. My first one was that Senator Fede is discussing an irrelevant issue. And secondly, I now rise again on a point of order that Senator Fede is misleading the House by saying and providing the impression that our tourism arrivals have declined. Now, Madam President, it's a point of order, not a point of elucidation. So I do not know why he's now attempting to elucidate something that is, first of all, incorrect. So I think I want to make it clear. My point of order is a point of order, not a point of elucidation. And Senator Fede need not attempt to elucidate something that in the first place is incorrect.
Okay. Senator Fede, I think I have indicated that you should stick to the bill before the House. Just simply speak to the bill of payment system and services. I've given you that latitude. I am now instructing you to stick to the matter before us at this point in time.
Thank you, Madam President. I always am guided by you, but the member, the Senator Ferdinand, has just stood up and said that I have misled the House and by extension the nation. And so I think that an opportunity should be given me 30 seconds to respond to what he has said. And I will move on with your thing. Because
Senator, if your information has been presented, the senator has stood up on a point of order, and you wish to clarify, it means that I will have to ask both senators to present the information to the House, and I will make that judgment. I have not asked. I am simply instructing you to move away from this discourse and stick to the bill at hand.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I am happy to make the St. Lucia Tourism Authority's report a document of the House, Madam President, because it would be very unfair to me that a member stands on a point of order, accuses me of misleading the House. So I will make it a document of the House. I'll move on. But in moving on, I re-emphasize my point. And that is, as we introduce payment system, which is crucial for the tourism sector, dayboat charters, Madam President, small business people, tourism attractions, who all need these systems. We're not passing this bill in isolation for ourselves. This is not just for the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. The stakeholders who are most likely that will use this are people who are on the front line of the economy. And the people who are on the front line of our economy are, some of them are in tourism, some of them are in retail, some of them are small business people who are doing business at home. And so, Madam President, we cannot debate this bill, I'd like to put it to the members through you, without talking about the experiences of those people who need the services that this bill is going to render. And a number of them, Madam President, and a great demand for these services of payment systems. And I think of PayPal, which a number of online retailers are actually using. A number of people who are within the tourism attraction business are using PayPal and Simply Book Me and a whole host of point of payment systems. There are hundreds of them that exist in the stratosphere, Madam President, of e-commerce and doing business. It's all well and good. But we also do have a number of those people within the tourism industry. And I'm sorry that if it hurts the members opposite for me to outline that vendors and taxi drivers and people within the tourism value chain need the point of payment systems. I just can't understand why this is hurting the members opposite. And to say further that these people need to optimize their business, there's limited business I maintain. There has been declines in the number of customers, and if there is a decline in the number of customers, business is harder. Now, having said that, Madam President, I want to also state that I gauge the timeline of the conceptualization, drafting, and now the passage. But I heard the leader of government business mentioned that the bill was between 2021 and 2024. I gather from his speech that it was either being reviewed or it was talked about. But 2021 came up, and between 2021 and 2024. But we're now in 2025. So this means, Madam President, that it took us 4 years before we get here. And I know the legislative process can take a while before it reaches the Parliament. And that's fine. That's been the norm. But the point that this enforces is that we really need to do something about beefing up the capacity of our AG's office to move a lot faster on very crucial bills like these. Very important. And the reason I say this is that it jerks my memory back to the ease of doing business process. And I recall that there's a certain Caribbean country that was at #1 in the World Bank ratings of ease of doing business for CARICOM, and St. Lucia was #2. Albeit St. Lucia was the leading one in the OECS for many years. But there were a few legislative changes that we had to make concerning that of approvals from planning, electricity connections, and others. And this point about the timely passage of legislation to create an easier flow of business, and as well to make the whole legislative process more efficient, dates back to decades. And what we really need to do, as this bill has also re-emphasized in the time that it took, is that we need to really make sure that we give the AG's office the very best support. And this is not a political statement. Both parties have been saddled with this reality. And we now need to make sure that we do everything possible, Madam President, to ensure that if we're going to drive diversification, if we're going to drive whether it's payment systems or ease of doing business, or whatever the bill is that we wish to bring to this House, that it is done in a more timely fashion so that we can be more competitive as a small island developing state. Madam President, I thank you.
Senator Charles.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a few small points. First of all, I would like to put on the record, I currently serve as a member of the Eastern Caribbean Payments Council. So for all transparency, I do have knowledge of the background to the legislation and certainly support it. I also want to tell Senator Ferdinand, Leader of Government Business, the work of the Payments Council, I think we need to understand is much more than just retail payments such as short pay. It involves a lot of other types of payments, including wholesale payments. So I think senators should take the opportunity to do a little bit more reading about the methods of electronic payments in the Caribbean today. Senator Lee spoke about his level of anxiety about the composition of the Payments Council. I don't have that anxiety for a number of reasons. I think it provides the opportunity for all subject matter experts to be involved in the council. And I was drafted in as a member of the council because of my knowledge of the telecommunications sector. And because we deal in electronic payments, there has to be some reliability of the platform and the vehicle for moving these payments. So you must have a sense of what's happening in the sector, the reliability of the sector, and some of the risks involved in using the electronic sector. And in fact, I think some of the resistance that has come about to the bank is there are people who still think that they need to be able to move around with cash. But the bank is trying in its wisdom to minimize that risk of moving around with too much cash, hence the push for the electronic payments. Notwithstanding this, Madam President, the bank also at some point in time had the experiment of promoting cryptocurrency. There was a project called Dcash by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, which has since ended, and I don't think the bank is pushing cryptocurrencies as much as other people are pushing it. But what the bank has been doing is to ensure it does trials before it comes up with these recommendations to the governments. The other point I want to make, Madam President, has to do with the consumer protection. And I think Senator Lee also welcomed, and I think we all welcome the provision for consumer protection. But one of the fundamental challenges I have with consumer protection processes is the amount of time it takes for the consumer. You have to go to so many layers of complaint submission. And just for a moment, listen to this. Clause 45 speaks to, not 45, clause 47 speaks to complaints. And it says that...
Senator? Did you say clause 47?
Clause 47, complaints, page 44, 45. And it says, subject to subsection 3, a licensee participant or agent shall provide a reply in writing to the complainant within 7 days from the date the complaint was received. Madam President, we're talking about electronic payments. It's not writing a check or going in for a slip to a bank. We're talking about money that has moved in a few seconds. But yet still, you have to wait 7 days to receive a response. But what is more critical is when you move to the next stage of the complaint. It says in section 47, subsection 5, a complainant under subsection 4 must specify the nature of the complaint, the redress being sought, and the reasons for the dissatisfaction, and be accompanied by a copy of the complaints made to the licensee, participant, or agent, a copy of the reply by the licensee, participant, or agent. What happens if you get no response in the first case? Because the whole idea of going to the next tier of complaints is because you haven't received a response. And oftentimes, as happens sometimes in the telecommunications sector, people who have complaints with their services, they go through that same anxiety. They make a complaint, they haven't received a response in this number of stipulated days, so they go to the next level of the complaint to the regulator, and in the absence of any formal response, there are further delays sorry, in the response by the regulator. So I think we must pay particular attention to this section on consumer protection, that we don't create any further anxiety to consumers, especially those who already have some reservations and suspicions about electronic payments. There are people who still feel that, using cards, they don't trust cards, they still trust their cash. They want to go to the bank, they want to see when they deposit X amount, it's in their bank book. They don't want a receipt by electronic mail saying, I just withdrew $180. They want it recorded. So I think we have to bear in mind all of these anxieties by consumers. Notwithstanding, the bigger goal of the bank is to ensure that we minimize the risk of burglary, of theft, of moving with too much cash. But we must continue. It's really an ongoing process working on consumer protection. But with these small points, Madam President, I think it's a commendable effort for the government to actually accede to the request of the central bank and for us to adopt this piece of legislation. Thank you, Madam President.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. I welcome and thank the senators who contributed to this debate. It is obvious that these amendments are welcome, and they are welcome with concerns, which is understandable. And even with the various amendments that will be made, we can all appreciate that it will not get it right away. We'll not get it perfect right away. And which is why I appreciate some of the observations made. And I'll start with Senator Lee with regard to consumer protection, which we all agree is critical. And I think in my submission, I did make reference to security and confidence of consumers and users, as well as compliance. And the ECCU and the Eastern Caribbean Payment Council that he mentioned, the composition of the council, I think that's a legitimate concern, but I think that conversation will have to be taken by the wider stakeholders at the regional level, because these observations, various territories I don't know if they do it proportionately or there is a policy that they use to decide, not just the number, but the composition in terms of the various members. So that's an interesting discussion that I think is legitimate for a wider discussion with the stakeholders. As for the comments by Senator Charles, I believe it is always good to know that the members of this chamber have certain experience and competencies, and they can relate to some of what happens here from a professional background experience. And I was pleased when he mentioned that he would have been a member of, I think it was the Telecommunications Council or one of those organizations. Eastern Caribbean Payment Council. Now, Madam President, I'm very pleased to know that within this chamber we have people who can bring the experience to bear on the debate. That is what I really appreciate, and that they can enlighten and enhance the quality of the conversation and add value to the debate. So I welcome that observation, and he did make a point about the complaints. I think I just want to go back to my notes here, the point he made about complaints by the customer and how that can be addressed. The bill provides for, I don't think I read that verbatim in my presentation, but I did have some notes here on that particular area. So I just want to share it with Senator Charles and for the benefit of the rest of us, that the bill provides for complaints of a customer to be made in the first instance to the licensee, and if that does not work, that is the participant or the agent or the licensee, and subsequently, in a second instance, to the central bank. So if you're not happy with the rate of the response or the urgency of the response, then you have the facility of reporting, complaining to the central bank, who I am sure would be in a position to take some action or cause the licensee or the agent to respond. So I'm happy that that observation was made and that there is some measure of a channel through which that can be addressed. Madam President, unfortunately, I can't say the same to the submission by the opposition member who spoke. And it's unfortunate that he missed your opening guidelines. Again, he was late, and there we go again, not in his chair, and I'm speaking to an empty chair, but I'll speak to the chamber. Madam President, when Senator Fede started his contribution, I thought there was some, real reference being made to some legitimate issues when he spoke about ensuring that the digitalization of the financial services in the region is taken seriously, because payment systems can help to make it possible for the regular person to be able to do business. I thought that, so I sat there thinking, well, for a change today, maybe we're going to have a good, mature discussion. But then, Madam President, in the opposition's usual style, even when there is a legitimate, good matter, a good piece of legislation on the table, this opposition can never just come to this chamber and call a spade and say that this, whereas we would like it to be improved, like he said, but this is a good thing. They have to find a way to distort the argument. And so Senator Fede tried to descend into a debate about tourism numbers. Now, he's very skillful, Madam President. So he starts by making a connection between the tourism industry and digital technology and digitalization, which is fine. And I would be the first to agree that, in fact, I had a conversation on one of my visits on behalf of the country with a couple credit card companies where we are exploring making it possible for the regular farmer, the regular vendor, the regular service provider who does not own a big business in St. Lucia not to miss out on the tourist dollar. So if a tourist does not walk around with cash, we want all St. Lucians who have a service or some product to offer to a tourist to be able to do a transaction. So I welcome that. And I think it should be easier for these people to be able to have access to digital transactions. But when you take the debate down the line of tourism arrivals, that clearly was not relevant. And I know the skill of the senator, but I've always reminded him that he's not going to be allowed to get away with those tricks. So, Madam President, the senator engaged in a whole charade of issues trying to compare and talk about tourism figures. And fortunately, he was not able to get that across. But, Madam President, there's another point that was made. And that is, you see, I've said it before, even when the opposition says something good, they tend to make a good thing sound bad. Here is Senator Fede saying that the AG's office may need a bit of beefing up and, to make things move faster. There's nothing wrong in saying that. But you see, here's where the problem lies. I want to remind Senator Fede, while I agree, and I'll take that with all its good intentions, whether it was meant to be good or not, I'll take it that way. All of us will agree that all of our service providers and government service and systems in this country can improve. Of course, from AG to passport office to birth certificates to everything. However, I want to remind this chamber that if you go back and you just do a small comparison of the number of pieces of legislation that the AG's office in this tenure has been able to bring to the table and to pass in the interest of the people of this country. Just take a look and go between the year 2021 to 2025 and go further back between the year 2016 and 2021. And I think once you do that, the answer will be very clear. And one more thing I wanted to say about the legislative process and the AG's office. Madam President, this morning we have about 5 items on the order paper. One of them will be for first reading. 2 of the 4 items that we intend to pass, the legislation that we intend to pass today, are not for first reading, but for second reading. And I have made that point before, that this government believes in consultation. We come to this chamber, even when people say, hurry up and do that. It's not about hurrying up and doing things vitae, helter-skelter. We have to take time and give the relevant stakeholders, the drafting people, the legal people, the regular St. Lucian, civil society, an opportunity to consult and to add their voice and their contribution to whatever we are doing, especially when we want to change legislation. So it's not a matter of coming to say, oh, I passed, your AG's office is working too slow, and you all should be able to have done that before. There are times when you need to take your time, put the bill out for first reading, give time for the public to digest the bill, to discuss the bill, to consult on the bill, to give feedback to the bill, return to the chamber during within a reasonable period, and to be able to pass the bill or to make the amendments. And that is the way this government has operated. So I have no difficulty with being more efficient, but I have a lot of regard for taking your time to consult and to allow bills to go through the process. So, Madam President, I want to remind the Senator that half of what we're doing today is actually showing that this process is active and is being adhered to in this particular government. So I wanted to make sure that that was clear, and that while we appreciate efficiency and speed of delivering services, we will not compromise the need for consultation when we pass and amend legislation. And I look forward, Madam President, to the changes here benefiting our service providers, our small farmers, our vendors, the people who may not have had the benefit of doing cashless transactions. When we get to that point, that they too will benefit. And that the persons who use the PayPal and the SurePay and all the other digital platforms or medium, that they too will feel secure and confident that the system works, that their identity is protected, their investment and their payments are protected, and that they can trust the system and work with it. So I look forward to this on behalf of the people of this country. Thank you, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that the Payment System and Services Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to provide for the licensing and regulation of payment service providers, the oversight of the payment system, and related matters.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Clause 3.
Purpose.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Part 1, clauses 4 to 12.
Administration.
Part 1, clauses 4 to 12 stands part of the bill. Part 2, clauses 13 to 27.
Licensing.
Part 2, clauses 13 to 27 stands part of the bill. Part 3, clauses 28 to 37.
Oversight.
Part 3, clauses 28 to 37 stands part of the bill. Part 4, clauses 38 to 40.
Designation of payment systems.
Part 4, clauses 38 to 40 stands part of the bill. Part 5, clauses 41 to 43.
Rules to regulate systems.
Part 5, clauses 41 to 43 stands part of the bill. Part 6, clauses 44 to 47.
Consumer protection.
Part 6, clauses 44 to 47 stands part of the bill. Part 7, clauses 48 to 52.
Settlement, netting, and finality of payments.
Part 7, clauses 48 to 52 stands part of the bill. Part 8, clauses 53 to 59.
Winding up and administration of an operator, a participant, or a payment service provider.
Part 8, clauses 53 to 59 stands part of the bill. Part 9, clauses 60 to 65.
Administrative measures and penalties.
Part 9, clauses 60 to 65 stands part of the bill. Part 10, clauses 66 to 72.
Miscellaneous.
Part 10, clauses 66 to 72 stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as have a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Payment System and Services Bill went through committee stage without amendments. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and that the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Payment System and Services Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This Act may be cited as the Payment System and Services Act 2025.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for first reading a bill shortly entitled CARICOM Arrest Warrant Treaty.
CARICOM Arrest Warrant Treaty.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move that this bill be presented for second reading in the next or subsequent sitting of this Honorable Senate.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for first reading a bill shortly entitled Administration of Small Successions Amendment.
Administration of Small Successions Amendment.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move that for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to enable this bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, The question is that Standing Order 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Please proceed, Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I beg to present for second reading a bill shortly entitled Administration of Small Successions Amendment. Madam President, if you were to ask me what was the piece of legislation I was looking most forward to have presented today, it would be this piece of legislation. And I'll tell you why, Madam President. I come from a background where those I was raised with and those around me didn't have much. And when you don't have much, it's very important to you and those around you, your loved ones, what happens to that little that you have. And in some cases, there are situations where people pass on, parents, grandparents, relatives, and the little that they have left behind does not have enough for those who are entitled to inherit it to be able to even access it. And as we know, we have a legal system that there are certain processes we must go through if we are to inherit whatever little bit that our family or our, the persons that went before us have left behind. And in some cases, they are inheritants or descendants or people who are line relatives or who have a right to the estate. We like to use that. When I hear estate, sometimes we think of some big, but in the legal jargon, I'm sure Senator Lee will help me there. Sometimes what the person is left behind, I don't even know you could use the word estate because it's so little that in Creole they say bien. Papa or ikite bien bao. Now bien really means your estate, whatever is left behind. Now when well-to-do people pass on and they leave acres of land and businesses and millions of dollars, their children and their dependents can hire big lawyers and go through all the processes to be able to partition the land and get all those things. But if what your parents leave behind, Madam President, is a little, a little pickup van, a little pickup truck that's probably worth about $20,000. And that is the pickup truck that is needed for you to be able to continue to manage the farm, to move from point A to B. And there are 5 children left behind. You need to have some way of being able to ensure that somebody in the family can have that thing on their name, can inherit it, and can move on. And sometimes small amounts of maybe cash that was left over in the bank, where an old lady would have been going to the bank with these little coins wrapped up in her brassiere to go and make a little deposits for years and years. I had a famous grand aunt, I remember, the great grand of somebody sitting in this chamber, who used to, they carry that there, and that's very important to them because they've worked so hard and they've tried all their lives. That is their lifetime savings. It may sound small to some of us. $5,000 might sound like nothing. Some of us make many times that every month. But for this little lady on the hill somewhere, and what's our friend's name, the lady she called her? Miss Marie, the Miss Marie. She would have valued that. That's her lifetime investment. And it would be unfair that this Miss Marie passes on and Miss Marie's child or children are not able to access that because the legal fees they have to pay is even more than the inheritance itself. And it is a government with a conscience, Madam President, like this government, that finds it fit and necessary to come to this House and this chamber, the Senate, and say, you know what? Let us give the High Court and let us create a channel through which people who do not have much, when they pass on, or when there is something that their children or the people in their lives can inherit, that it does not become a bigger burden for them. There are cases, Madam President, where the only thing somebody can inherit is the little society money that the family has to be able to bury the dead. And if you know what I mean by society, Madam President, it's those little thrift cooperatives that exist, particularly in the rural communities, where those people don't even know how to get to a bank, that they go every month and they pay a little something, and hoping that at the end of the time of their lives, at least their children can go and withdraw it to give them a decent burial. And that these things are very important to people who are not privileged. And Madam President, what this small administration of small succession amendment intends to do is to create an environment or situation that eases the burden on people like Miss Marie, welcome back Senator Polius, Miss Marie, so she can inherit what her mother left behind, even if it was a little bit. I have a case, Madam President, I remember I have a good friend who owned a TX, a taxi vehicle. He had a TX plate. And he didn't pass on, but he's in a situation where he's unable to continue to operate because of his medical condition. And his son came to the office and told me that all he wants is to be able to access that TX plate so he can ply the father's trade to be able to take care of his father. Now, Madam President, there's a value on a TX plate, you know, and sometimes you have people renting it for thousands of dollars, and the vehicle that the TX plate is on, there's also a value on it. Now, Madam President, under the previous legislation, if that commodity was valued above $5,000, we had a problem. So now, that gentleman, the vehicle may be $30,000. The TX plate, if you add it, might probably bring it up to 40 or 45. That gentleman, through the High Court, can actually get to have the vehicle transferred in his name, the TX plate transferred in his name, so he can ply the trade that his father used to do to be able to take care of his father and himself. Now, Madam President, under the previous legislation, do you know how much that gentleman may have had to pay? And we have a lawyer sitting there. Maybe he can tell us if he makes a presentation. Now, I'm not suggesting that the lawyers are being unfair. They have to make their living, and they have to charge fees. And I hope that and I'm happy that the legal fraternity didn't seem to have any objections, that they support this. There's not much they're going to lose because these people don't have much to give them anyway. But I believe, Madam President, that this amendment is very critical to have people with less to be able to access whatever their parents or whatever is left behind for them. I think the context here, Madam President, is very, very important. And I thought I kind of moved away from my prepared notes because for me it's personal and it's important. Because I don't think anybody died and left anything for me. So, but I think people close to me have seen situations where an entire family goes into chaos because they cannot afford to even access what is left for them for their survival. And they fight over it, and there's all kinds of problems, and they remain in a worse state than before their parents or the person passed on. So, Madam President, under the Act, Cap 4.12, and that was enacted way back in 1953, special provisions are being made for the grant of a probate of letters of administration and so on, so that it causes the Registrar of the High Court to process application for letters of administration and so on, so that people can inherit or can get up to, it was initially $40,000, but I believe in the lower house, then the figure was brought to $50,000. So inheritance of up to $50,000 so that the persons who are inherited can access it. It gives the Minister of Justice the authority to update the values of movable and immovable properties included in an estate succession. Now, again, that would estate, in these cases, it don't mean much. But I think it also gives for some flexibility. So whereas the bill itself says up to $50,000, but in the discretion of a minister or the Minister of Justice, it even gives them the opportunity to be able to, in their discretion, allow somebody to access a little more. And I think that's fair enough. We're not talking about huge sums, we're talking about moderate value. So, Madam President, I really look forward to the support of this chamber. I cannot imagine anybody with a conscience to see anything about this, the intention of this bill today, to be able to make it a little easier for people who do not have much, but whatever they have a right to inherit, they are able to inherit with little or minimal stress and minimal, inhibitions. Thank you, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that the Administration of Small Successions Amendment Bill be read a second time. Senator Charles.
Madam President, not much to say, but I chose to speak before my colleague, Senator Lee, because I believe he may respond to some of the, not concerns, but some of the questions I may have. First of all, I think, like Senator Ferdinand said, what we're trying to do is to avoid the anxieties that we face now are not passed on to the generations after us. So we have to try to get it right. But what is of concern to me is, why are we doing this? And clearly there's a level of anxiety now. People don't want to prepare themselves for death because they feel they will die. When you tell someone you should do a will, but I mean, what are you trying to tell me? I'm close to death? And I think we should try to ensure our society moves beyond this level of anxiety. But what causes the anxiety, in my mind, to some extent, is some of the process in preparation of the will itself. And I would say some of us who attempt to do it realize that some of the challenges you face, so you really just sometimes either forget or time goes by and it's never done. And you reach to this point now where you die intestate and your beneficiaries have to go through the process of administration. So I think we need to find out why, and I know some of the legal firms are attempting to educate our public on preparation of wills. I have gone through some of the websites and they actually sort of lay out some of the procedures and so forth. But generally in our society, again, there's a level of anxiety of dealing with the legal fraternity and lawyers. And perhaps we should be thinking about some element of legal aid for our people. Not necessarily saying pro bono, but a more proportionate cost of legal services for people who cannot afford, the fees. Because I know in some cases, some of these things are based on percentages, and you have to go through the process of valuing estates and so forth. And I think that is a question I have. But one more issue that I would like addressed as well is to ensure that this process of letters of administration coming from the magistrate, or the registrar rather, doesn't take a lot of time, because assets depreciate. And I think the example that we give, I think Senator gave about a TX, the vehicle is depreciating. Some assets may appreciate like land, but others are depreciating. So the longer you take to get it done, even if it's through the registrar or through the courts, I think we have to bear this in mind. And this is why I think we need to address these issues, and these are just two small points I need to make on this, and certainly support this amendment, Madam President.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Madam President. On the last occasion when I stood up to address the Payment Systems and Services Act, I made the point that there is a constant necessity for us to review our legislation and update it. And perhaps this is a glaring example of that. The Administration of Small Successions Act has been in existence for a number of years. And for a number of years, the value of the estate that could be administered under this act has been at $5,000. And this is one of a number of pieces of legislation where we've put figures in that have been time locked, so to speak, and that we do need to go back and review and update, because due to inflation, the value and the impact of these pieces of legislation have been dwindled almost to the point of nothingness. So we do need to go back and review a number of pieces of legislation to update them to make sure that they are relevant to our current standard and of living. Now, my little friend and the leader of government business put me on the spot a little bit in in their presentation, but I will hopefully address some of the questions that they've raised from my experience in another life. When I saw this piece of legislation, I was actually quite elated for it. And ironically, when the initial, I think the initial draft had a value of $25,000, which I thought was woefully inadequate. Then I saw the second draft of $40,000, and I note that during the course of the debates in the lower house, that sum was then increased again to $50,000, a sum with which I agree entirely. And I'm also happy that there is some provision made for the minister going forward by order to increase this sum as inflation grows and the value of assets that persons hold grow, to ensure that we are not penalizing persons who might otherwise benefit from this piece of legislation. That being said, what is the purpose of this legislation? How does this really benefit individuals? On death, whatever assets persons have, as large or as small as they may be, have to be addressed and administered in some way. Money lying around the house is obviously an easy thing to deal with because somebody can access that directly. But what happens to money in a bank account, a vehicle, a piece of land that they may hold in conjunction with another person, where the entire value may not exceed $50,000? Currently, under the Small Administration of Small Successions Act, a person would make an application to the registrar of the High Court, and it does not require the involvement of an attorney. You make that application directly to the registrar, who then has responsibility for putting the application together, considering it and approving it if certain conditions are met. I do take the point raised by my colleague, independent senator, about the time that is involved, and obviously the registrar, unfortunately, carries a number of hats. He is registrar of the High Court, he's sheriff, he's the administrator general. So there are a number of roles that he's required to play. And I'm saying he in this case because it happens to be a man, not being sexist in any way. And so there is a concern, I do have the concern, that if we increase significantly the number of applications that can be made to the registrar, that we may create a bottleneck that cannot be quickly addressed. And so I think there is a need, and I always call upon the leader of government business to ensure that the resources are in place, to ensure that when we make these legislative interventions, we don't then create more problem or hinder the benefit that we're trying to create by not ensuring that the administrative resources are put in place. And also to allay the fear of my colleague senator, this applies both to intestate and testate succession. So where you have left a will and the value of your estate is less than $50,000 in this case, you can go through the process of a small estates application through the registrar. You don't have to get a lawyer involved, so you don't have to pay any significant amount of fees in getting this your estate, well, the estate of the deceased person administered. And this has very, very, very practical consequences. Fortuitously, I had actually intended to approach the Attorney General on precisely this matter, because it just so happened that I had a few clients who had come to me seeking assistance with rather small estates, and I pointed in the direction of the registrar, but in some cases I knew it would exceed the $5,000 limit, and even if I was willing to assist, the fact is, and save on my fees, there are fees for advertisements and so forth that are going to total at least $2,000 that they would have to meet in any case. So if you're thinking of a $7,000, a $10,000, a $15,000 estate, to find $2,500 to spend on the processing fees, leaving aside any legal fees that are attached, that is prohibited for a lot of persons. And so what you're finding happening is that people are just leaving their estates alone. And that creates problems because you have assets which are not being put into productive use, are sitting down and deteriorating, or persons are not able to move forward with their lives because they cannot administer the estate to make sure that they get control over the asset that has been left for them by their deceased relative. But I would like to encourage us to go forward, because as I pointed out, a lot of times our legislation is dependent on other pieces of legislation or connected with other pieces of legislation. And one of the important things I think that we need to address in relation to successions, be they tested, well, in tested successions in particular, is the civil code. Currently we have, and we've maintained for no reason that I can understand, a distinction between legitimate and illegitimate children. And that creates significant hardship. You have persons who, again, no fault of their own, their father happened to have been married, the father may have taken care of them for their whole life, but because their father happened to be married, he's not considered a single man, they are unable to inherit if he does not leave a will. And the point that my colleague senator made is very much on point. There is a need for you to put your affairs in order before you pass. For whatever reason, I know in St. Lucia we have I take it as a cultural reluctance to put wills in place, because for some people think that if I do that, I'm going to die the next day. That's the only explanation I can put to it. But what then happens is that you lose complete control over your estate on your passing if you do not put a will in place. And especially if you are a married man who's had children outside what's known as wedlock, because you may have left your wife umpteen years ago, you may have lived with this other lady for the majority of your life, you've raised your children, everybody knows these are your children, but because you did not leave a will, and because you are married at some point, therefore you are not a single man, your children cannot inherit. And so the ungrateful children that you may have had from your previous relationships, and I'm being honest, this is what happens in practice, and I'm trying to be as blunt as possible in the hopes that persons listening to this debate will put their affairs in order. Because what you then have happening is the wife, again, who you may have left for very legitimate reasons, but for whatever reason you never divorced, then inherits from you, and the children that you've taken care of, the lady who you've lived with for umpteen years and you've contributed, you've built a life together, cannot and will not inherit, because you've not taken the hour that it will take to sit down and come to an attorney and write a will. Now, the good thing about St. Lucia is we actually have and recognize what's known as a holographic will. So if you, for whatever reason, you do not want to come to a lawyer to do it in a full notarial form, you can write your will in your own handwriting, sign and initial every page, and that will suffice once your testamentary intentions are clear. And I'm saying this because it's one of the hurtful aspects of my practice, where you have persons coming to you to give you their life story, their relationship with their father, how they interacted, grew up with him, and then you have to disappoint them by saying, you know what, at the end of the day, I'm very sorry. There's nothing I can do to assist you because he did not leave a will. So this is a very welcome legislative intervention. I think we do need to make additional interventions as relates to inheritance under intestate successions in the Civil Code, particularly removing the distinction between legitimate and illegitimate children. And sometimes that, again, ruins family relationships, because you have situations where, while the father was alive, the children are all well and good together. They've known forever that these are their brothers and sisters. But then the moment the law steps in and says, well, hey, what? Only legitimate children can inherit, all of a sudden they're not too sure about these brothers and sisters that they grew up with. And the law says you're not entitled, so therefore you're not entitled. So I think we need to address that legislatively. I call upon the leader of government business to please take my humble recommendation into cabinet and see what can be done about that. But I commend this piece of legislation. It is a very, very timely intervention. One that, as I said, I was literally about to go and seek the Attorney General's assistance with, because I believe for too long persons have been frustrated in their attempts to administer rather small estates. And $5,000 was, what can you get for $5,000 now? You very easily pass that number, that limit. And so $50,000 I think is reasonable for now. And I'm happy that some provision has been put in that the minister can increase it later on as things go on. As time passes. There was one other area I would suggest for amendment in the substantive legislation, which is that it requires you to wait 3 months before you can bring the application for the small estates administration. I'm not sure what the thinking and the rationale was for that 3-month limitation previously, but I believe we need to move things along and perhaps remove that provision as well, so that the application can be made as soon as the person passes away. And with that, I support this piece of legislation. Thank you, Madam President.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. This is a very interesting conversation. For a moment, I sat there and I remembered my days at school. I learned a few things today. And again, this is a value of being part of the Senate, where you have what you call an independent voice. I really want to thank my colleague senators, particularly the 2 independents who made their submission on that bill. And I did tease Senator Lee a little bit, and I'm happy that he responded in a very positive way. So first of all, Senator Charles's issue where he raised the people not having a will is a real situation in this country. It is real. As a child growing up, I never even knew there was such a thing until somebody in I think my wife's family passed, and I heard about, legitimate child, an illegitimate child, and then I discovered, so I'm an illegitimate child myself. So, you start to, it was almost traumatic. It was almost traumatic, that you as I think I was almost an adult, when, I was an adult. When you finally realize there's certain things that you ought to know as an individual that you don't know. And when we come to the Parliament with legislation like this, it's not only passing the legislation to benefit the people we intend to, but it's also an opportunity for education, for the public, for us to enable our listening public to understand what provisions are necessary and are available to them so that they can improve their lives. So I think the depreciation of assets issue that Senator Charles raised is very critical as well, because depending on what the person who passed on leaves, the beneficiaries may be strategic. So for example, if it is an asset that appreciates in value, the longer you wait to claim it, maybe the more value it has, or it accumulates. And if it is conversely something that depreciates in value, like movable property, a vehicle, then the faster you work on it, the better your chances of getting the maximum value. So all of these decisions, can impact people when they know what they're supposed to know. Madam President, Senator Lee, I want to thank him again for his submission, and I hope that perhaps the average St. Lucian will probably sit and review this presentation on YouTube or whatever other medium we have for the Parliament, and not to witness any drama and exchange and what people always or normally believe they will see in the Parliament chamber, but to really get very critical information. And I think it is well taken that there needs to be more public education on matters relating to how people live and how they prepare themselves and their dependents when they pass on. Madam President, the need to review the legislation, I quite agree. And I was just sitting there wondering, in 1953, I think that's when my mom was born, what was the value of $5,000? And sometimes you have to look at legislation and look at context. I can well understand why it may have been $5,000 in 1953. If you had $5,000 in 1953, you go messier. That may have been worth $200,000 today. Assets of when I heard my great-grand and my grandfather talked about this, a buck. A beer buck was $5. In the, I don't know if anybody has, but maybe for Senator Harrow, he might want to go home and discuss that if he has great-grand. But they would talk, my grandfather would talk to me in the language that he knew. He would say, de beer buck, moi paye toi beer buck pour ça. So when he says a beer buck, he's talking about, now beer, it actually means beer buck. It's a banknote. So, but they say beer buck because it was Creole. But when I thought about it, my little French background, I realized it's billet, meaning a bill, paper. But it's billet buck, meaning banknotes. So when he tells you he paid 3 billet buck, meaning 3 banknotes for a particular asset, it's like $15. But that was big money then. 3 billet buck was almost like what, $50,000 now. So I can understand why in 1953, that piece of legislation was talking about $5,000. But how could you be in 2025? I mean, I'm so disappointed that this thing hadn't come up before. How could you be in 2025? And I'm not going to blame any previous government for that, because, that one, no, I can't say it was the opposition's fault, because it was only, what, in 2016 they got into government, and previous to that there were other governments. But better late than never. I think that piece of legislation was way due. And I want to commend the Prime Minister Philip J.P. I don't know where he was able to find that. It takes a lot for you to actually go and pick up those things. I think this gentleman, and I want to give some credit to the government, not to put anyone down, but to go and pick up those things and say, you know what, we need to fix that. These are things most people don't even bother about. Who wants to go and look for 1953 legislation, $5,000? These things are in the archives. But it has to take a responsible, caring, compassionate government to go and pick that up and say, listen, we have to fix that to make it better and easier for people in this country. So, Madam President, the conversation about legitimate children was very interesting because in our culture, we have what you call common law relationships. We have a culture where a certain gender people seem to be thinking it's okay for them to have children with more than one partner. That's almost cultural. And of course, those who try to do the conventional correct thing and try to get married and do things right, they may have had an issue, and I'm happy Senator Lee raised that, where you have children who are legitimate and children who are illegitimate not having equal rights, if you like, or access. And circumstances can cause these things to become very uncomfortable for some. And the issue of common law relationships too, I know now that it is a little better because fathers who are not married to the mother at the point of baptizing the child or registering the child, they are allowed to now carry the father's surname. That was not the case before. So I can tell you, when I had my first son, I was not married to his mom, but he carries my surname. Thankfully, you know, we were moving forward. I'm young enough to have benefited. But no, there's nothing wrong. I mean, when I had my first son, I was not married to his mother, but he carries my surname, and I'm happy that he does. And I think when Senator Lee spoke about other legislation that we need to amend to be able to work with this is very critical. I will take his message to the cabinet, and he gave us a couple examples. I think that is critical. So yes, Senator Lee, I think, you know, these interventions really help to serve a good purpose. Writing your own will, I welcome that. So Senator, I was saying to Senator Polius, you know, I suspect she agreed she's going to do her own, but we'll notarize it. She advised that you can notarize it, but I didn't realize I could do that. So I may have wasted some funds. But then it is important that in the context of what we're doing, that St. Lucians must be educated to understand the importance of putting their house in order. I completely agree. Putting your house in order while you are healthy and well, and so that you do not leave chaos and confusion. And a lot of the conflict we have in this country stems from those things. Families separated, generations all over the place, because our forefathers and mothers did not put their house in order. And so when they leave assets, it's confusion. The most peaceful families tended to be those that parents had left nothing for. They had nothing to fight over, so everybody lived in merry. But whenever there was inheritance, chaos. So, and it gave opportunists, people who were in positions of power, opportunity to even, as a colleague of mine says, musty pay on these people. And that, I think, is unfair. So, Madam President, I believe more education is needed. It is incumbent on us as a government to do that. And the recommendation of amending the 3-month wait period, again, I think is welcome, because the more efficient, the faster you can get those things moving, the better. So, Senator Lee, I must indicate to him that I will convey his contribution to the Attorney General and to the government in the cabinet, to the executive, so that we may have to soon return to do further amendments to make this thing work. Madam President, it's one of the best days I've had so far, because when I come here and I see meaningful amendments, meaningful steps being taken to change and make people's lives better, it really touches me. So I want to thank the Honorable Prime Minister, the AG's chambers, and the senators in this chamber, as well as the intervention by the Minister for Home Affairs, Housing, the Central Castries member, in the lower house, suggesting that we increase it to 50,000. I welcome that, and I look forward to everybody who can benefit from this to benefit. So thank you again, and well done to all those who were part of this event.
Senators, the question is that the administration of small successions amendment bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the Administration of Small Successions Act, Chapter 4.12.
Clause 2.
Amendment of Section 2.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 3.
Amendment of Section 3.
Senators, you all are aware that there was a change made in the lower house. Page 4, Section 3, Clause 3, Amendment of Section 3. The back of page.
Madam President, yes, we are aware. And under Clause 3, page 4, Section 3, the amendment made was to replace 40,000 with 50,000, and in the second line of that particular section. So we would like to do likewise in the Senate.
Both lines A and B? The
Correct.
second line of both sections?
Correct.
Okay, you delete 40,000, replace with 50,000. Okay, all on board? All right. Clause 3 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Senators, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the administration of Small Successions Amendment Bill went through committee stage without amendments. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and that the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the administration of Small Successions Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same, as follows. This Act may be cited as the Administration of Small Successions Amendment Act 2025.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for first reading a bill shortly entitled Immigration Amendment.
Immigration Amendment.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to enable this bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Please proceed, Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. I beg to present for second reading a bill shortly entitled Immigration Amendment. Madam President, this amendment may appear on the surface to be a simple one, but it's very necessary at this point. This proposed amendment is to change the definition of minister in the context of this bill to reflect the current configuration of the Cabinet of Ministers in this present government. Traditionally, Madam President, the Minister for Home Affairs has tended or has been the Minister for National Security. These two portfolios or these two departments were basically under the same minister. So traditionally, the Minister for National Security was usually the Minister for Home Affairs, and that minister had responsibility for immigration, which falls under the police. But the current configuration, we have the Minister for National Security and the Minister for Home Affairs being two different ministers, and therefore it is necessary for purposes of, clarity and to avoid ambiguity, to ensure that in this context, the definition of minister is made clear, to refer to the minister who is responsible for immigration, being the Minister for National Security. And of course, that would cause the other various departments to fall in line, and so that the administration of that ministry is done and is clear. So this amendment, simple as it is important to allow for that to be facilitated, and so we ask that this be made for that particular purpose.
Senators. Right. Just give me a second. The question is that the Immigration Amendment Bill be read a second time. Senator Fede.
Thank you, Madam President. Very simple amendment, and I have no qualms with the essence of the amendment, but it is always reflective, Madam President, when we debate issues such as the immigration situation in the country. Madam President, the Immigration Department would be exposed to citizens by birth, descent, marriage, naturalization. But as well, Madam President, if we look at the area of descent, quite recently in the House, we passed a bill that second-generation St. Lucians can become citizens. Prior to that, Madam President, only descendants of your mother or your father had to be a St. Lucian. So what we have done by doing that measure is that we have had to, we've exposed, the level of exposure that the Immigration Department would have had is that much more. Madam President, the other important pathway to citizenship under our laws is that of citizenship. And so our CIP program, Madam President, allows individuals through various pathways.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I rise on a point of order, and I draw the Chamber's attention to Standing Order 37-1. And if I may read Standing Order 37-1, I came very prepared for what I see happening there, so it's not going to be allowed, Madam President. I'm not the one who will not allow it, but I will challenge it. And I draw the attention of this chamber under the Standing Orders 37-1, contents of speech. Subject to the provision of these standing orders, I quote, Madam President, subject to the provision of this order, standing orders, debate upon any motion, bill, or amendment shall be relevant to such motion, bill, or amendment, and the Senator shall confine his observations to the subject under discussion. Madam President, I stood here a few moments ago and I moved a motion for an amendment to do one specific thing. This amendment has nothing to do with citizenship by investment or how immigration operates. This amendment is to define the meaning of minister, and it has everything to do with the current configuration of the government. All it says is that we are going to ensure that the person responsible for national security is the person responsible for immigration, which is a department. It has nothing to do with what goes on in immigration or what goes on anywhere. It's only about the individuals who will be responsible for that department because of the configuration of the cabinet of ministers. Senator Fede has just started his presentation and he's going down the CIP. I knew he was going there. He's going down CIP. I cannot see how, Madam President, under the standing orders, that this conversation has anything to do with a government or a parliament saying this department should be under this minister and that department should be under that minister because they hold a portfolio. So, Madam President, I plead that Senator Fede sticks to the focus or the intent of the presentation that I made under this amendment and debates the motion, sorry, the bill before us.
Senator Fede, you shall proceed with your presentation, but of course, sticking to the matter, the issue before us.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam President. The member obviously is very nervous about having a holistic debate, Madam President, about the immigration sector in our country. Madam President, you know, ministers are responsible for guiding and shaping of policy for various departments, whether it's tourism, whether it's national security, whether it's the passport office. I see that there's a related bill that's coming up next, whether it's the immigration department. And I really do not see anything wrong, Madam President, by making sure that we properly define the conversation to include, Madam President, those issues that will have dire ramification on the specific bill that we're coming to do. So if I take this as a bill where the reason for doing this is maybe because the government wants to strengthen the immigration department by making sure that the Home Affairs Minister that would normally be tasked with, at times, it would be in a configuration of the Ministry of Homeland Security. I take it to mean now that they're placing this with the Immigration Department because the government would like more efficiency and a better organization and implementation of various policies within that ministry. But, Madam President, the exposure to the ministry is a crucial conversation to be had now, in my view. And so for me, not only do we have the St. Lucian population that are passport holders that are going in and out of the country, but we also have second generation St. Lucians, many of them living abroad, and we also have citizens who have applied for citizenship by the investment program. And that is necessary for us to have that discussion. As much as, for example, a while ago, I thought for a moment the leader of government business was responsible for the House because he says this is not going to be allowed. But I am very glad, Madam President, that you took your position and you made the ruling on it. But Madam President, just a very brief moment. In the CIP report submitted to this House not so long ago, laid in this House, the government has said that since coming to office, they have issued over 2,000 applications. So these are 2,000 families under the
Honorable
CIP.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I rise on a point of order.
This is your point of order.
My point of order is to reiterate under section 37(1) that Senator Fede is not debating the bill before us. The bill before us, he may wish to interpret whatever he wants. The bill before us is about assigning a particular portfolio or department under a particular minister. That's all it is. A particular department, which is immigration, which deals with a number of things, not only citizenship, a number of things, under a particular minister. If Senator Fede wants to have a CIP conversation, he might want to bring a negative resolution. But this debate, Madam President, is about a simple amendment to ensure that the line minister is responsible for immigration. It's about the definition of a minister. Madam President, I think it is disingenuous for Senator Fede to attempt for the second time to have a conversation or debate on something that he wants to introduce into the debate. And I think that is grossly unfair and is grossly inappropriate at this time.
Okay, Senator, Honorable Leader of Government Business, I am listening very attentively to Senator Fede's presentation. And when he speaks to immigration and he speaks to persons who are holders of passports or who are citizens, I'm listening very intently to hear where this discourse is heading. So I have advised Senator Fede to stick within that issue of immigration. However, I am listening to see how this ties into where we are. I have cautioned you, I've given you leeway. You are speaking to CIP, which persons who hold passports, who are citizens. I want to hear how you relate this to the fact that we have reconstrued the ministry from one minister to another. Make it relevant, make it connected, please. Thank you.
So Madam President, and you've raised a very salient point, and I'm so sorry that this line of argument makes the leader of government business as nervous as he seems on. But Madam President, you see, we have a population now of 183,000 individuals. I don't have before me any report to suggest how many passport holders are there. But those citizens, Madam President, by birth, in my case, I'm a descendant of a St. Lucian citizen. And we went further, not so long ago in this House, to also include second generational St. Lucians. By marriage, Madam President, people are also qualified for citizenship. By naturalization, individuals who come to St. Lucia and live here for as long as 7 years. Now, the leader of government business does not have any problems with me mentioning any of these areas, because these areas are not controversial. But the only problem he has, Madam President, if you listen very well, is if I mention citizenships that have been allowed and people who are allowed passports under the CIP. It really begs the question.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. I always wait for your permission to speak. The member has just misled the House and misrepresented me. As a matter of fact, Madam President, and I'm standing on a point of order, that the member has misled the House.
What is your point of order,
He has
Senator?
misled the House by misrepresenting what I said. Madam President, I reiterate, this bill is a bill where we are simply making an amendment with regard to which minister heads which agency. Everything that Senator Fede has said is not in line with this conversation. Whether it's citizenship, whether it's immigration, whether it's how many persons hold passports, whether it's second generation, all of those conversations, Madam President, I have stated when I stood the first time, are not relevant to the debate. And now Senator Fede has proceeded to mislead the House and misrepresented my statement. I think that is gross misrepresentation.
Could you repeat for the record, what did Senator Fede say that
misrepresented? He said that I
misrepresented?
have a problem with only one thing that he says, and that's citizenship. Madam President, I have a problem with everything that he has said on this debate with relation to the bill that I presented. Every single thing he has said has nothing to do with the minister being, the portfolio being under, not under the previous minister, but under a different minister. That's what it's about. And I did indicate which two ministries that were actually in this conversation, from the Ministry of Home Affairs to the Ministry of National Security, because of the change of a configuration in the cabinet of ministers. Now, Madam President, I don't know how that has anything to do with everything that he has said, so please don't let us that he does not misrepresent my submission,
Senator,
that I only have a problem with CIP.
Senator,
that's not the
I
case.
think you made the point. Okay. Senator Fede, you have strayed a bit. You've gone from citizens by investment, you have gone into citizens from naturalization. So I ask you now to make the point and move on.
Thank you so much, Madam President, for your guidance. Madam President, the point is that, and if the Senator Ferdinand would only allow me and stop being so nervous, he would see the argument. Madam President, what I'm gathering here now is that the ministry, the Immigration Department, is now going to go from the Minister of Home Affairs and go to the Minister of National Security. Okay? Madam President, there's a massive crime crisis in this country. And I know that the Minister of, it's not my role to determine how the Prime Minister configures his portfolio. But I look at his present portfolios, Madam President. I look at national security, which he holds. And Madam President, it's a lot of pressure even for the most experienced of men. And I know the Prime Minister says he's a 6-star general. But, Madam President, just imagine the pressures that the Home Affairs Department or the Immigration Department is going to now bring to bear on an already pressured minister. I mean, Madam President, just recently we had homicides, a massive spate of homicides, which that department that we're now bringing the immigration to will have to deal with. Madam President, I think we had about, was it 14 murders in about 10 days? So it's a significant amount of stress and work. And so if I had to configure the cabinet, Madam President, while it's not my role in the Constitution, and that is of the Prime Minister, we see before that there's been record-breaking crime, massive crime issues. My point is it fair to also give this individual more work, right, while he has a lot of pressure already dealing with a crime crisis? Madam President, we had to close off Beaufort, and we said it was a crime zone. Remember that, Madam President? And I felt sorry for the Prime Minister because I would not want to be in his shoes to have to deal with all of that. And now, the leader of government business is telling us that it is the prudent thing to do to give such a man more work to do. Madam President, I look at the economic headwinds that is facing us. The Ministry of Finance is also in that zone. And the economic headwinds, Madam President, that the Prime Minister will have to deal with, the issues there. And I'm asking myself, wow, the Prime Minister is not Superman. And I really sympathize, Madam President, with the role of the load of work. Now, if you've got the Ministry of Finance, National Security, and all of that.
Senator Fede,
yes,
I am interrupting because you're being repetitive. And I'm just following you and I'm hearing the same thing. So move on your debate to a point where we can hear something other than the repetition here. You strayed, you came back, and then you are repeating the same thing about the Prime Minister. So move on with your debate with something substantial.
Yeah. So then, Madam President, thank you for that guidance. But so then, here we have a ministry, to my mind, that is burdened with some of the country's most pressing challenges. And now we're saying, let's put immigration. Hence now I'm saying that in the immigration department, look at what else they will have to deal with. So in addition to all of those issues I've highlighted, we're now going to put the immigration policy under this ministry. And note, Madam President, a minister is responsible in our Constitution for shaping and for guiding and leading the policy. Now, why I took the time to go through all of the pathways of citizenship, I have no problems. I've seen no trace of increases on the birth. In fact, Madam President, they have said our population growth is declining. On the descent, I have not seen an exodus of St. Lucian children born overseas. I've not seen a report from immigration that suggests that that's going to be added pressure to the new minister who's taking on that role. On the marriage, I have not seen any report that suggests that there are a great number of St. Lucians who are marrying foreigners and bringing extra pressure to the immigration department. Where I see the spike, based on the government's own information presented to us, is under the pathway of the citizenship by investment. And under that, the government says, in a report presented to the lower chamber not so long ago, that in 2021, 2022
Senator
financial
Fede,
year.
Again, you are straying back into the CIP. What is the point of your argument, your debate, as you speak to a transfer of the immigration department to the Department of National Security clear cut.
Yeah, so now in addition to all the stress that the existing Ministry of National Security, Finance and so on have to deal with, we're now adding more stress with this move by bringing an additional, according to the government, over 2,000 applications in the citizenship that they have granted, they say up to 2023, 2024. That's what the government says in its report. And it was presented here, and I can make it a document of the House in case the members forget their copy. The government says they've granted, since coming to office.
Senator Fede, you are saying so to say?
I'm saying so to say that there is a lot of work for this ministry. Because in addition, remember, there's...
Senator Fede, you have said that countless times. Like I said, you're repeating yourself.
No, but I'm elaborating on another subcomponent of the point. Applications is what the terminology used by the government in its report. But, Madam President, applications in an applicant can have 4, 3, 2. There's been no elaboration by the ministry. So it leaves me to speculate that each applicant is allowed as much as 4 passports or dependents. Families of 4 are allowed. So then, therefore, Madam President, the government's own report, which says that they've granted over 2,000 applicants, it means that they are close to 8,000 to 10,000 passports of citizens that we don't know. We have not had the personal interface. They don't live in
Senator Fede.
Yeah.
Senator Fede, please take your seat. You have quoted from a document, and you're now inferring, you're putting your own calculations into it. This is going on record. You said 2,000 passports, and to the point of almost 4 per family, almost 8,000. You're adding the numbers, and there is nothing to quote that this is what it is, and this is going on record. So I need you to be very careful with the numbers that you are quoting here in this space. I need you to be very careful with the figures that you are quoting, that you are throwing out there without any evidence of it being taken from any document at all. We have to be more responsible in our deliberations, in our presentations. If you want to refer to a document, that is all good and well, but for you to just make the calculations and present it out there, and it's going on record, I'm advising you to be very, very careful.
Madam President, I thank you for the guidance, but Madam President, you would be happy to know that I do have supporting documents to back up what I've said. So the government's report is up to 2023, 2024.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I again rise on a point of order, and I refer again to 37(1). Madam President, it is not right. It is not right. It is a gross violation of the standing orders in this chamber for Senator Fede standing to debate a bill where there's an amendment to a configuration that allows for configuration of cabinet for one minister to be given a particular, one department to be transferred under a minister. Senator Fede taking this discussion, going into CIP, switching to crime and murders, and now going down a road of figures on passports. Madam President, how can that ever be relevant to a simple amendment where a department is being configured to fit under a particular minister of government? Madam President, this is just not right, Madam President. And I will not comment on your judgment. That is up to you. But I believe Senator Fede has really overdone it this morning or this afternoon, and he's not debating the bill before us. And Madam President, based on the standing orders that govern this chamber, this should not be happening. This is This is wrong, and it's a violation of the standing orders that guide us, Madam President.
Senator, Honorable Leader of Government Business, your interjection, your point of order is noted. Senator Fady has 45 minutes to present on this matter. And he chooses to speak on immigration, not just the minister or the shift from the Department of Home Affairs to immigration, from Home Affairs to National Security. He so chooses to speak on the issue of immigration as all-encompassing. Senator Fady has the right to speak on immigration as an all-encompassing issue, a matter. However, I am listening and guiding that discourse. I think I would like to be fair to all senators, to allow their presentations to be as broad as possible and deep as possible, and as relevant as possible. The Immigration Department deals with certain aspects that Senator Fady has identified. I have allowed him to make the connection. He has spoken of the size of the ministry. He has spoken of the concern for the health of the minister holding the ministry. I'm allowing Senator Fady to make the connections and make his point. And I really want to give Senator Fady and to guide him through his presentation. So, Senator Fady, you shall continue your discourse to stick to the point of the Immigration Department, the amendment that makes it okay for the Immigration Department to be transferred from the Department of Home Affairs to the Department of National Security. We are staying there. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, for your guidance on the debate. Madam President, I think before I was interrupted, you cautioned me, and quite rightly, about the need to provide substantive facts. And Madam President, just to make sure that what's on the record, that I can prove the veracity of it, I ask your very, very brief indulgence as I submit to the House not only the report that the government has submitted, but also, Madam President, to also note that it's only up to 2024.
And so, Senator,
secondly,
I shall interrupt you to say that you present it to me and I will make copies.
Yes.
What I want you to do now is to move on with your argument, making the connection for the transfer of the Immigration Department from Home Affairs to National Security. I have given you enough leeway. Make that point, make that connection,
yes,
and move on.
And so, Madam President, when whoever takes on the portfolio to be Minister of Immigration, he's not just passing legislation in the Parliament to guide immigration policy, but also, Madam President, as it relates to the operations of immigration, that ministry becomes crucial in terms of whether they are doing the right things, whether the department has the capacity to deal with the demand for immigration services to our country. I think, Madam President, that immigration is absolutely crucial as it relates to the overall security of our country. So there is some nexus and a great alignment between national security and immigration. I get that. And I see why the temptation could be made, because there is going to be a lot more collaboration and coordination. However, Madam President, where I am concerned is that the exposure of increase in citizenships, Madam President, in my possession today, and I'm willing to make them documents of the House, I have got 2 contracts where the government has exposed the Immigration Department to at least 11,000 applications in 2,000 contracts in 2 contracts to Galaxy. And I will make them a document of the House, Madam President, one of the contracts suggests...
Senator Fede,
Yeah.
where are we heading this?
Madam President, I'm showing in my argument why it's an unwise decision to pair up the Immigration Department under so much pressure because of the increases in the number of passports that we have given in CIP and otherwise, and to put it with an already overburdened Ministry of National Security.
Okay, it is said. Now move on.
Yeah, but Madam President, I am establishing the point.
No. Senator Fede, I have given you enough latitude. I have.
Yeah.
Okay? Senator Fede, mind your language in the House, please. You're not even aware.
Okay.
You should address the chair with some level of respect, Senator Fede. You're not even aware of what you're saying. Be cognizant of what you're saying, how you address the chair.
I have the utmost respect for the chair, Madam President. I shall let you know.
Please
And for
demonstrate
you as for you as well as a
well,
person.
demonstrate that, because that is different from what I'm hearing.
I am shocked that there's any question, Madam President.
Well, it means that you're not paying attention to what you're saying.
I'm guiding.
So I have said, you have made the point, move on. Your concern for the size of the Immigration Department with the number of citizens, Senator Fede, move on with your discourse.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam President. So 11,000 applications, and the government has not said how many passport per applicants. So that is still unclear in the contracts which I have before me, Madam President. So, which really is a continuation of the point, and it really does compound the problem on how difficult the new dispensation of immigration services and the capacity of that department needs to be strong and needs to be aligned as well with the right ministry. So, Madam President, it is with a lot of concern that I debate this bill, seeing that so many, the volume of increases to the, or the demand for immigration services, how that in fact is going to affect the situation in the country. So while this might be seen by a lot of people as a simple amendment, I believe that the ramifications are quite dire, Madam President, and it is with much concern that I conclude my debate on this issue today, Madam President, based on the information I've got before me, contracts that the government has signed, as well as the government's own report submitted to this House not so long ago, where they have told us that there has been a significant increase in the number of St. Lucian holders of passports. Madam President, this has tremendous ramifications for existing St. Lucian passport holders. Our passports, Madam President, as now holders of St. Lucian passports, are allowed the courtesy and the privilege of going to certain jurisdictions, Madam President, visa-free. And you have to ask yourself whether not doing our jobs, or the immigration department not being able to drive the level of efficiencies that we need, whether that in fact is not going to affect the quality of the St. Lucian passport. So, Madam President, I am very concerned on many fronts. At present, there are suggestions of a travel ban. We are on the brink of a travel ban.
Senator Fede, you are straying, you are getting out of there. Okay? And if you cannot stay focused, I will have to ask you to take your seat.
Thank you very much, Madam President. So I re-emphasize my concern, and I state, Madam President, that the new configuration of the Immigration Department will have a number of challenges to deal with, and I sincerely hope that the national security crisis which the country continues to endure at this present time, that it doesn't in any way deprioritize the need for there to be an even greater focus on the immigration situation in the country and the increased demand there will be for the efficiency of the immigration department. Madam President, I thank you.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure what exactly the debate, the argument that was raised is about. All I can do is to respond to what I heard. I will not try to interpret too much. But it's very clear this morning that Senator Fede came here with an agenda. And no matter what I said, no matter what you did, no matter how many times I attempted to make the point that he was not debating the amendment, his sole purpose in this conversation was to go down a road that this opposition on every given opportunity in this chamber, you could be debating marbles and nuts, you could be debating tourism, you could be debating agriculture, it doesn't matter what you debate. They find a way to infuse their favorite propaganda topics into the debate. And so, Madam President, this morning, I heard CIP, I heard crime and murders, I heard passports, travel ban. Madam President, I have no idea what Senator Fede has achieved based on this debate. But you know something that stood out to me, Madam President? For a while, I was wondering whether Senator Fede has developed a certain level of care and love for the Honorable Prime Minister because of what he said. Senator Fede said that he feels sorry for the National Security Minister. He said that that's too much work, the National Security. And I don't know why he's saying that about the Prime Minister, because the minister, the substantive minister in that case, is the Minister for Home Affairs. So I don't know why he was taking the debate on the Prime Minister, but you see, he had his target. And he's feeling so, and he loves the Prime Minister so much from what he was saying. He cares so much. It's too much work. Why do you want to saddle? So all of a sudden, the same individual who stood on a platform and said that the Prime Minister needs to be flogged, F-L-O-G-G-E-D, in Derek Walcott Square, he now loves the Prime Minister so much that he's worried about the burden and the work that the Prime Minister has to do. Who's buying that? That all of a sudden the opposition, because he didn't speak on his own behalf, he was talking on a platform of an opposition event. So the person that needs to be flogged, why would you flog somebody if you believe, that he's so good that you care so much about him having all that work to do? You care about him so much that you are worried about his ability or how much work he carries. Today you come into this house and you posture as if you love this person so much. Well, Madam President, in all situations there's good. So perhaps it was a good thing that he was allowed to go down that road so that he can demonstrate to the people of St. Lucia the hypocrisy that exists and the two-faced attitude of the opposition when it comes to members on this side. So when it is convenient, when it suits their purpose, people should be flogged. But when it suits their purpose, oh, that's too much work for you. We feel sorry for you. We don't want you to carry all of that burden because we care for you so much. We care for you so much that you should be flogged. Madam President, I really wish I could have responded to the substance of the conversation, but there was no substance, and so there is nothing else I can respond to. There was no substance, and so I submit this to this chamber for its approval. I thank you, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that the Immigration Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the Immigration Act, Chapter 10.01.
Clause 2.
Amendment of Section 2.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Senators, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the immigration bill, okay. In the right place now. Senators, I beg to report that the immigration amendment bill went through committee stage without amendments. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and that the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the immigration amendment bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Immigration Amendment Act 2025.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for first reading a bill entitled Passport Amendment.
Passport Amendment.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to enable this bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill as this sitting. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Please proceed, Leader of Government Business.
Thank you again, Madam President. Madam President, I beg to present for second reading a bill shortly entitled Passport Amendment. Madam President, this amendment, as was in the previous amendment for the immigration amendment, is a similar amendment for the same purpose of the line minister being responsible for passports, just as that minister would be the same minister responsible for, so that based on the current configuration of cabinet, that particular minister is providing oversight for passports, just as he would for immigration. So I put this to the Senate for its approval.
Senators, the question is that Passport Amendment Bill be read a second time. Leader of Government Business, any comments?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. In closing, I just want to thank senators for their contributions on the various bills, but I also want to say that, if senators choose or they wish to have debates on particular topics or issues, they are free to do so. So I welcome if the opposition wants to have a debate on passports or immigration or crime or national security or CIP, whatever it is, that it is disingenuous to just drop, just jump on any particular bill or motion to to try to talk about their favorite discussion. We had a debate, Madam President, previous to this bill, where I think the discussion was healthy and it contributed to St. Lucians and members of this chamber getting the benefit of the conversation. Unfortunately, that didn't happen for the entire day, but I hope that, we can be more responsible. And when we choose to make a presentation, while it is okay to share your points of view, but that at least for the benefit of those of us in the chamber and those who follow, that there is some relevance and some, serious substance in the debate. I hate to be part of a conversation where I can't even extract substance for me to rebut. And so I hope that this practice, this continues and is not encouraged in this chamber. But I thank members and I look forward to these amendments, aligning the ministries and the departments under the proper configuration for the benefit of all concerned. I thank you, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that the Passport Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as have that opinion say aye. As many as have a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the Passport Act, Chapter 10.03.
Clause 2.
Amendment of Section 2.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Senators, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as have that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as have a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Passport Amendment Bill went through committee stage without amendments. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and that the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the reports of the committee be adopted and that the Passport Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This Act may be cited as the Passport Amendment Act 2025.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the Senate will stand adjourned sine die.
Senators, the question is that the Senate do stand adjourned sine die. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Just before we adjourn, Senators, I wish all of you a very safe and enjoyable carnival season. I know Senator Charles would be on the road. Whoever you are, wherever you are heading to, please be safe and be vigilant. And of course, lately, I think as we close to, we have been joined by two other guests in the name of a legal student, John Tench, and a banking officer, Cutley Abraham. We want to welcome the young men who have joined the Gibeon siblings. So once again, sitting adjourned. Have a great afternoon, Senators.
We have come to the end of today's sitting of the Senate. The Sergeant-at-Arms is just making his way out. And today was an interesting for many reasons. What we just witnessed, the final bill which was passed, final two bills dealt with the immigration and passport amendment bills. This, I thought, would have been a pretty straightforward bill, as we had witnessed in the lower house on Thursday. However, unexpected debate and query came up, and there was a lot of back and forth from the leader of government business who introduced the bills and the leader of opposition. Basically, the immigration amendment bill, like the passport amendment bill, just sought to define the minister who would be responsible for those two areas, immigration and passport. In the past, those two portfolios had, those two areas had fallen under the portfolio of the National Security and Home Affairs Minister, which was the Prime Minister. But with the appointment of a new Minister for National Security in the person of the parliamentary rep for Mikud North, these portfolios, immigration and passport, now would fall under his jurisdiction, that is Jeremiah Norbert. And so this was all the bill sought to do, define the minister with the responsibility for these two portfolios. However, the leader of opposition, he sought to what he called broaden the debate on immigration and also the passport, although he didn't speak to the passport thing, but under the debate on the immigration amendment, the leader of the opposition, Dominic Fede, he broadened the debate to include citizenship by investment, who one would define as a citizen, and there was an intervention by the leader of government business who said that he was really contravening the standing orders. However, the president of the Senate, Honorable Alvina Reynolds, she gave the leader of the opposition some leeway, although there was constant interruptions and interventions on her part. The other bill, which was pretty interesting, and there was a lot of involvement, was the Administration of Small Successions Amendment Bill. That was passed. This bill basically gives the registrar of the High Court the right to be able to help loved ones who are attempting to inherit property left on by their deceased family members. So basically, it gives an easier and a cheaper means for the family members to inherit property without a will after the death of a loved one. And the amount that was given in terms of the estate and how much that the registrar could rule on was 50,000, although there was a provision in the bill that the minister responsible could also use his discretion if the property is, in a little in excess. But basically, the true intent of that bill is to allow the registrar of the High Court to rule on property that is not in large amounts. But there were two very interesting points that emerged from that debate, and one point came from the independent senator, and he called on the leader of government business to please make a distinction to please look into the whole distinction between a legitimate child and an illegitimate child. He mentioned that in his practice he had seen so much confusion and so much division when a loved one passes, and the question of division of property comes in, and then there's the question of legitimacy versus illegitimacy when it comes to the children. And it was an intervention that the leader of government business welcomed, and he said he would be making that suggestion to his cabinet of ministers. He himself giving his own experiences on some of these issues. The other important point which I would like to note came from, I think, the other independent senator, Senator Charles, and it was the need to provide public education to St. Lucians that you should prepare a will. He said that he felt there was a culture that St. Lucians do not engage in it, because the minute you tell somebody to prepare a will, they would be feeling that, hey, am I dying tomorrow? And he was saying that this is not widespread in the culture, and they encourage more public education, and even someone made a suggestion, even some legal assistance to be able to get St. Lucians into the habit of preparing a will before their passing, to avoid a lot of these problems. So the other bills which was passed was the Banking Amendment, the Payment System and Services Amendment Bill. But there you have it. Interesting debate from the sector, and some really important pieces of legislation which came up for debate in the House today. So on behalf of all of us here at the National Television Service and the Government Information Service, my name is Virgil Leonti. Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, you could stay tuned to the NTN, where we will be rebroadcasting some of the interesting contributions which came up in the Senate today. So once again, thank you for joining us. You have a good afternoon.